From Anshe Sfard, Bethel Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Parshat Re'eh, discarding holy writings, Shaimos. We know that if you have some holy writings, Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzah, you can't just throw it in the garbage. You have to put it away in a respectful way. Sephardic Jews tend to put it in geniza, to simply place it in another room for a long time. Ashkenazic Jews tend to bury it. You take it, you put it in a plastic bag, you put it in a box, and you bury it for a long time to come. Where is the source that we don't destroy Jewish writings, holy writings? This is an amazing concept, the idea that not only do we study holy writings, but the holy writings themselves have sanctity. The idea that there was a Siyum Hashas, a great celebration of hundreds of thousands of Jews celebrating the completion of the Talmud, is a reflection of this value of the book, the holiness of the book, the people of the book, the Am HaSefer. It all comes from Parshat Re'eh, where it says, when you come to the land of Israel, you're going to destroy the name of the Gentile idols. You're going to destroy their altars from this place. But do not do that to God. Lo tasun kein l'Hashem Elokechem. Don't do that to God. In other words, don't destroy our altars. More broadly, says the Sifri, says the Gemara in Makos, Azhara lamochek es Hashem. This is a warning against it for a Jew not to destroy the name of God. So the name of God cannot be destroyed. There are 7 official names of God. The Rambam enumerates them, and those are the official names. So, and that destroying an actual name of God, that would Hashem, Elokim, Shakai, etc. Those would be actual Torah violation. The Rambam goes on to say that any holy book, and that would include a Mishnah, a Siddur, prayers, official prayers, this is all a rabbinic violation of the same principle. In fact, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says in Daf Yud Ches Beis 18b that they made a great holiday on the 3rd of Tishrei. A great holiday was held in Second Temple times for the very fact that they stopped writing God's name in secular documents, because what happened was it was nimtza shtar mutal be'ashpa. These documents would land out in the garbage, and they had God's name on them. And the day when they stopped writing God's name in documents, the rabbis made a great yontif, a great celebration, because we do not want to throw God's name, God forbid, in a disrespectful way. Now, the problem is, in modern times, with the notion of Xeroxing, the notion of photocopying, the notion of the proliferation, thank God, of hundreds and thousands of Jewish volumes. What is a person to do? How are we going to deal with the mounds of Shaimos, of the documents that are holy documents? What are we going to do with them? Every synagogue prints weekly bulletins, monthly bulletins. Every school, thank God, in New York, you have 120,000 students studying in Jewish schools. Who knows how many in Israel? And each child gets all kinds of photostats, booklets, work booklets. Everyone has a notebook. What are we going to do with these mounds and mounds of reams and reams, thank God, of writings about the Torah? Holy writings, what should we do with them? So there are 5 points of leniency that have been written over the years. The Tzitz Eliezer has a tremendous article about it. The Rabbi Chanan Spector, Rabbi Spector, after whom Yeshiva University is named, also has a very long discussion about it. And here are some 5 leniencies. And based on this, we'll see the bottom line. The Chavos Yair, Rabbi Yair Bachrach, a few hundred years ago, he wrote, and Rabbi Soloveitchik agrees, that if it is a printed book, it has no holiness. Now, most authorities, says the Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, Tzitz Eliezer says, most authorities reject this principle. However, this can be the basis of some leniency. the very fact that something is merely printed is a basis of leniency. Also, a sort of relevant to that could be that if it's printed in a script rather than in a block print, the Torah script is more severe. The handwriting that we use, or certainly in English, is less severe. Number 2, the Chazon Ish, about 100 years ago, he takes the position that if it's number 1, it's printed, and number 2, you didn't print it to learn it. You printed it because you were writing a letter, and you happened to write a word, something from the Torah. It wasn't for learning, it just happened to be a verse that was there. Perhaps that would be a leniency as well, perhaps for wedding invitations, etc. Generally, it's recommended not to put verses on wedding invitations. You can put a phrase from a siddur, but not a verse. Rabbi Chanan Spector, the great Kovner Rav, he wrote in the Ein Yitzchak, in his Chuvos, that im niskaven shelo l'kaidesh Hashem, if you had in mind, when you press that Xerox button, have in mind that you don't want to sanctify the name of God that's in this writing, then it's permitted. If indeed the printer, perhaps he's not Jewish, perhaps he's not a religious Jew, perhaps he doesn't appreciate what he's doing, and therefore if he prints it in that mindless kind of way, perhaps there's room for leniency as well. Rabbi Chanan Spector also mentions the second factor, and that is that if it's not printed to be a book that's going to stay where it is, it's just printed as a weekly bulletin. This week you'll print this bulletin, next week you have another one. It's printed to be discarded. So perhaps you shouldn't do that, but perhaps, says Rabbi Chanan Spector, perhaps that is a room for leniency. It's only forbidden when it's printed to last. Again, many authorities won't accept this, but it could be a basis for leniency. The Shvus Yaakov, another great work of responsa, he says, Im yavol levizayon, if it's going to come to a greater disgrace, if you're going to land out with reams and reams of papers flying around the synagogue, who knows, landing out where, blowing in the wind, the cemetery itself won't be able to contain it and they'll just be flying around. They may get into who knows whose hands, the hands of those who want to defile these texts. Then you could in fact throw them away, burn them, even though it seems so strange. That's his position. The Minchas Asher also mentions a leniency, and that is that if it's only derech malitza, if you were writing a letter, and instead of writing in Hebrew, in a regular language, you paraphrased a verse from the Torah, or perhaps mentioned the entire verse as a way of saying what you're saying in a cute way, that is also a room for leniency. You're not writing it to be learned, you're just writing it as part of conversation. So what about the bottom line? What do we do? The CRC, based on Rabbi Gedalia Dov Schwartz of Chicago, the Chicago Rabbinical Council, they say that surely tefillin, mezuzah covers, holy books, mishnayos, sidurim, Tanakh, certainly the Bible itself, Gemara, anything like that, surely should be buried, take it to the synagogue, hopefully they have a burial for it. Worksheets, you try not to write the whole verse, you try not to write in print, you write it in a script font, then you could perhaps put it in a double wrapped bag and discard it. Or recycling may also be better than throwing it in the garbage can. The Jewish newspapers that have many Dvar Torahs in them and the weekly bulletins that synagogues publish with Dvar Torahs should double wrap it in a plastic bag, put it in one plastic bag, close it up, put it in another plastic bag, and then you can discard it in this more respectful kind of way. The Star K says that it would be a disgrace to take a Jewish newspaper and put it in Shaimos. Here you're burying tefillin with a newspaper about the latest scandals. Surely, if you want to take out that particular page, that's one thing. But in general, if you have a newspaper that has Dvar Torahs in it, then simply wrap it in one plastic bag and that in another and discard it in that fashion. Some were lenient if it's simply put in the recycling, that somehow that's less disrespectful as well. Finally, this verse that we started with, Lo tasun kein l'Hashem Elohechem, don't disrespect God the way that we're commanded to disrespect the idols. The Rabbi Shmuel, quoted by Rashi from the Sifri, from the Midrash, says, He says, do you think any Jew in their right mind would ever destroy a Jewish altar? Why would there be a need to make such a commandment not to do that which we do to the idolatrous altar, not to do that to our altar? He says, no, very simple. Don't do as they do, worshiping idols, because those sins will lead to the destruction of the temple and the destruction of the very Beis HaMikdash itself. So the idea is that we have to live a life that helps to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, helps to rebuild the holy sanctuary, not to, God forbid, a life which leads to the continued destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Our life should be dedicated to these holy words. If we appreciate, we can convey to ourselves, to others, to our children, the importance of the Jewish word, the importance of the Vort, the importance of the Torah word, this will help to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Rather than destroying it, will be a source of the rebuilding of the holy in this world. Thank you for joining us here for our discussion of Parshat Re'eh. And join us each week for our discussions of the Parshiot, holidays, how-to questions. Thanks to Jason Lefkowitz for his technical assistance, always. And join us here again at the Anshe Sefard Bethel 11th Congregation here in Memphis, Tennessee, each week. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit ASBEE.org.